Princess and the Frog. A long time ago, in a place not too far from here, there was a princess who loved to go for walks in the woods. One evening, she came upon a cool spring of crystal blue water. She took out her golden ball and began throwing it into the air and catching it. Suddenly, she threw it too high and it fell right into the water. The princess was upset and began to cry. Alas, I have lost my favorite possession. I would give all my splendid jewels to have it back. As she cried, a frog appeared out of water.
Grant me one wish, and I will retrieve it for you,
said the frog.
I do not wish for your fancy jewelry. I wish to live with you and eat from your golden plate and sleep in your warm bed.
The princess had an idea. I will let this strange talking frog bring me my ball, and then I will leave him here. So she promised to grant his wish. The frog jumped into the water and soon returned with the ball. The princess was overjoyed. She grabbed the ball and ran back to the castle as fast as she could. The next evening, the princess was sitting down for dinner when she heard a soft knock at the door. Then a voice said,
Open the door, my princess dear. Open the door to the true love here, and honor the promise to me, though made by the spring so cool in the green wood shade.
The princess ran to the door and opened it. Realizing it was the frog, she closed the door as quickly as possible. She returned to the table, looking quite upset. There is a terrible talking frog at the door, said the princess. He retrieved my ball from a spring, and in return, I promised he could live here. I never thought he would make it all this way. The king, being a very honorable man, replied, If you made a promise, you must keep it. Let the frog in. The princess opened the door, and the frog hopped up to the table and politely asked the princess to share her golden plate with him. Reluctantly, she did. Once the frog had eaten, he politely asked the princess to take him to her bed to rest. The princess took him and placed him on her pillow. There, he slept all night long. At the first light, the frog awoke, hopped downstairs, and left the castle.
Oh, good, said the princess. He is gone. I will have to deal with him no more.
But she was mistaken, for the very next night she heard the same knocking at the door. She opened the door, the frog at his fuel, and he slept upon her pillow all night long. In the morning, as the day before, he simply hopped away. Then the frog came again a third night. As she closed her eyes to sleep, the princess wondered how long she would have to endure this awful routine. But the next morning, when the princess awoke, the frog had turned into a handsome prince. He explained how a malicious fairy had turned him into a frog, and the curse was to last until a princess let him eat from her plate and sleep in her bed for 3 nights. You have broken this cruel enchantment. Now, my new wish is that we will return to my father's kingdom, and you will marry me," the prince proclaimed. After a long courtship and becoming the best of friends, the young princess finally replied, "Yes, I will marry you." The two of them lived happily together for the rest of their days. Rapunzel. A long time ago, in a place not too far from here, there lived a beautiful young lady named Rapunzel. A mean witch named Gothel had locked Rapunzel in a room in a tower high above the ground. There was only one way into Rapunzel's room, and only Gothel knew that one way. Every day, Gothel would approach the window and yell up, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had beautiful long hair that she would wind around a hook and then lower to the ground. Gothel would climb up her hair to see her. Gothel kept Rapunzel's tower a secret from everyone around. Everyone except the prince. A handsome young prince named Garamond was riding past Rapunzel's tower when he heard her singing high up. He was enchanted by her voice, and he returned day after day to listen to her. He longed to meet her. One day, Garamond was lying in the tall grass, listening to Rapunzel, when Gothel walked up and called to her. Gothel hadn't seen the prince, so he hid in the long grass and watched Gothel climb up the hair and into Rapunzel's room. As soon as Gothel left, Garamond ran to the base of the tower and yelled, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And she did. How exciting! Rapunzel was about to meet her prince. From that day on, Garamond would return every day to visit with Rapunzel. They would laugh, talk, and fall in love. Eventually, they knew they loved each other and wanted to be married. They needed to find a way for Rapunzel to escape. The next day, when Garamond came to visit, he brought a giant umbrella. When Gothel climbed into the tower, Garamond and Rapunzel jumped out the window and held tight to the umbrella as they floated gently to the ground. Gothel was trapped in her very own tower. Rapunzel and Garamond were off to live in happiness. When Rapunzel and Garamond returned to his castle, the king and queen were overjoyed to meet Rapunzel. They immediately made plans for the biggest, happiest wedding the kingdom had ever seen, and they got married, and they lived happily ever after. Sleeping Beauty. A long time ago, in a place not too far from here, there lived a king and queen who were good and kind. The fairies of the land watched over the king and queen as though they were their children. When the king and queen had a baby girl, they invited the fairies to the grand feast, where the fairies became godmothers to the princess. The godmothers blessed the princess with beauty, kindness, wisdom, and wit. One fairy was not invited to the feast. She was a mean fairy. When she heard of the celebrations, she put a curse on the princess, saying, "At 18 years old, she will prick her finger on a spindle and fall into a sleep for all eternity." But the fairy godmothers heard this curse and quickly added, "Unless she is kissed by her one true love, at which point she will awake and live out her days unharmed and happy." Good thing for those fairy godmothers, because guess what happened next? Despite all the efforts of the king and queen, the princess came upon a spindle the very day she turned 18. She picked it up and felt the prick of her finger right away. She suddenly fell to the ground in a deep sleep. Seeing this, the fairies rushed around and placed the kingdom and all who lived in it under an enchantment that they should sleep until the princess awoke. They also enchanted the forest around the kingdom, so it would protect the castle from any harm. Many years passed by until one day, a handsome young prince from the neighboring kingdom was riding through the woods when he came upon the enchanted forest. He ventured into the forest, which let him pass, for he meant no harm. Arriving at the castle, he was shocked to find all the sleeping people and the perfectly preserved kingdom. Searching the castle, he found the room where the princess slept. There, he beheld the girl he instantly knew was his one true love, his Sleeping Beauty. And though the princess was sleeping, the prince couldn't help but lean toward her and give her a gentle kiss. And then the princess woke up. There are only a very small number of one true love kisses throughout history. This was one of those kisses, and the princess and the entire kingdom awoke. She was stunned to see the man she knew she would one day marry. Over the next few years, the prince and princess spent almost all their waking moments together, getting to know one another and fallen in love. Eventually, they married in the happiest ceremony either kingdom had ever known. And they lived happily ever after. Cinderella. A long time ago, in a place not too far from here, there lived a beautiful young lady named Cinderella. Cinderella was beautiful inside and out. Everyone who knew her loved her. Well, almost everyone. Cinderella lived with her stepmother and stepsisters, and they didn't like Cinderella at all. They were jealous of her and treated her very poorly. They made Cinderella do all the work around the house and give her only ragged old clothes to wear. But all that was about to change. In the castle near Cinderella's home lived a good and kind prince who wanted to find a wife. The prince invited all the ladies of the land to a ball where he might get to know them. Cinderella desperately wanted to go to the ball, but her stepsisters would never allow it. As the stepsisters left for the ball, Cinderella fell to the ground and cried. But then Cinderella heard a loud thump, looked up, and discovered a fairy godmother standing over her. "Get up," commanded the fairy godmother. "You are a good person, and you deserve a good life." When Cinderella stood up, she was dressed in a beautiful gown. When she ran out the front door, there was a magical pumpkin carriage waiting, which whisked her off to the ball. How exciting! Cinderella was about to meet her prince. From the moment Cinderella entered the ball to the moment she left the ball, the prince could not take his eyes from her face or turn his ears from her voice. The two talked, laughed, danced, and fell madly in love. Cinderella wanted to dance all night with the prince, but she also knew she must leave the ball by midnight, for her fairy godmother had warned her to do so. As the clock struck 12, Cinderella remembered the warning and ran from the ball. The prince ran after her, begging her to stay. Cinderella kept running. As she jumped into the carriage, her glass slipper fell from her foot, and the prince ran to grab it. Good thing, since this glass slipper was about to change their lives. Knowing that only his lost princess would fit the glass slipper, the prince went out to search the land for Cinderella. He searched high and low, eventually searching Cinderella's home. He knew her the minute he saw her. When the prince asked Cinderella if he might place the slipper on her foot, her stepsisters laughed as though he was crazy. Cinderella could never be the lost princess, they thought. But she was, and the slipper fit. Having found Cinderella, the prince was overjoyed. He vowed to never lose her again, and he didn't. And they got married, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Thank you for listening, boys and girls. This is from your Story Fairies. Have a good night.